Good evening or good afternoon, and welcome to Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and I'm joined today by Jonny Hibbard, who's back with us for the beginning of EFL League Two season. This season, Jonny is going to join us for a series where we're going to follow his favorite club, Stevenage. And luckily, they kind of happened to open on the schedule with another team that we've been covering on the show, which is Barrow AFC. And we're going to kind of break down that game and tell folks what happened with those two clubs over the offseason. So Jonny, last time we talked to you, we were kind of afraid that Stevenage wasn't even going to be in League Two. But that ended up working out in your favor. So why don't you start off by kind of telling folks what happened with Stevenage and how they wound up staying at the league.
Hi. Yeah, so I think that's the first thing to say about this game next Saturday, that it's I don't know what the odds that you would have got that this game would actually have taken place in League Two, because obviously Barrow, they were having, the opposite to us, they were having a great season. But on the other hand, people I was talking to who are supporting other clubs in the National League, they were kind of saying, well, do you know what? Barrow are rocking a little bit and they've still got some difficult places to go and so on. So I think they will, they'll soon forget it, but they might, count themselves very fortunate to be in this game on Saturday on points per game. But of course, that's nothing compared to what Stevenage have gone through. Quite honestly, I remember the first podcast I did about Stevenage with you, and I went through just what an awful season last season was. 3 wins, and to stay up after that is just quite surreal, to be honest. And we had this time of about 3 or 4 weeks in purgatory where we basically were relegated to non-league. That put the club in a really awkward position because I don't think they knew what league to sign players for, so that, a lot of the players that they brought in, for example, Ini Effiong from Dover Athletic, Tyrone Marsh from our neighbours in Hertfordshire, Boreham Wood, Ross Marshall from Maidstone, Elliot Osborne from Stockport, and I think Femi Akinwande from Billericay. That looks like a team that's built for non-league. Before the EFL appeal was announced, I think a lot of us had resigned ourselves to being in the conference and that we were putting together a pretty good team for non-league, and then all of a sudden this twist in the tail comes along with the EFL appeal, which obviously went in our favour. I don't think the EFL or League Two were particularly interested in saving Stevenage. It was very much about punishing Macclesfield for their non-payment of wages. And they're a nice group of fans. I have nothing against them, but obviously, the management of the club is, pretty dire. So far, Macclesfield haven't posted anything on their Twitter feed that indicates that they're now in non-league. So I think they're still in denial.
Yeah, it's really one of those situations it's sad to see. And, every year you see some teams in trouble, and obviously the COVID-19 situation has made things even worse. And you just hate to have that be the way that you stay up, but it's one of those things where you'll take it, and I'm sure Boro probably feels the same way, because this is a team that had been out of the Football League since 1972, and I'm not sure that points per game is necessarily how they wanted to get back into it, but once again they'll take it. And so now this is a team where last year they became known as Barcelona. Because they were such a high-scoring team. They had Scott Quigley had 20 goals, John Rooney 17 goals, Dior Angus 10 goals. So
that's a pretty decent season to compare to what we had. Obviously, I hope obviously none of that has any bearing on what will happen on Saturday. But yeah, I think Barrow have kind of been, should we say, paid back for the wrong of 1972, and I like to think Stevenage have been paid back for the wrong of 1996 and not going up when they won the leagues. So, I think it's all righted itself. There is karma in football after all.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like you said, I think that we had kind of talked about this on one of our Stevenage episodes last year, is that, both of these teams kind of left the Football League at one point or didn't get into the Football League. In Stevenage's case, under questionable circumstances. So, it's kind of like you said, like a payback. Now, with Barrow, I think that the two biggest stories are the manager is new. So Ian Evatt, he went ahead and bolted from Barrow, if you will, and has been replaced by David Dunn. And so now I did watch the Derby County Carabao Cup match where Barrow played. And certainly the
10
level
miles from me, and I couldn't go.
Certainly the level of competition may have had something to do with this, but judging by what I saw at this game, it looks like Barrow-Salona is probably a thing of the past, and I think Dunn is going to play a much more conservative game plan in League Two than if it was playing in the conference.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously saw the highlights of that game, and Barrow certainly made themselves chances. It's obviously it's really difficult to know with these kind of random games that are happening before the league starts, because we've obviously had the League Cup games. Stevenage were playing a certain team from the South Coast that I have an affection for as well. So not my favorite draw in the cup, really. What I did enjoy about that game is that there was one spectator in attendance, as in he was up a tree, and he's worth a quick digression. Actually, his name is John Westwood, but his official real name by deed poll, as we say in England, is John Portsmouth Football Club Westwood.
Yes, I've heard of
it. And this guy is covered in Portsmouth tattoos, and he's a character, and we need characters in football. But he turns up to games. He used to turn up playing a bugle, and he can't actually play the bugle, so that never went well. And he kind of switched to a cowbell, a few years ago. There was I remember actually a game, Portsmouth against Wimbledon. And the chant that he came up with, we were, playing absolutely terribly. He came up with the chant, "We've got a bell, you ain't." So this guy, he turned up, he climbed a tree for the Oxford playoff game. He was sat on top of a van, on top of several crates on a van, to try and see into the Kassam Stadium. So I can't fault his dedication. But anyway, we're here to talk about Stevenage. And I wasn't sure what to think in that game, really. I mean, Stevenage roared into a 2-goal lead, which, 6-7 months ago was unthinkable, particularly against a team from the higher leagues. On the other hand, they actually did all right in the Cups last year. They put up a pretty good fight in the Cups, So I feel like we can't read too much into it. Portsmouth were absolutely terrible at the back, just kind of, as we say, schoolboy defending. But I think psychologically it was really, really good, because basically Stevenage didn't lose the game. I mean, they lost on penalties, but they've shown themselves to be competitive. They can score goals. But I think it's going to be a key thing in the game against Barrow, because, an awful lot of last season's squad have gone. I mean, the retained list was, you'll remember that Alex Ravel, former player, had been put in temporary charge, and he just kind of grew into the job to the point that, I don't think he was ever really officially announced as the full-time coach, but it just became a foregone conclusion. And it was the real night of the long knives, So, there's barely a team's worth of players that survived the cup. But I think that need to psychologically distance ourselves from last season. It's really, really important. So, but still, I mean, the fans won't be there on Saturday, of course, but I just collectively for the club, we need to exercise the demons of last season pretty quickly. So I actually feel like, something like a 2-2 draw or something would actually be a really, really good result psychologically for Stevenage. Something like an injury time winner for Barrow would bring back, all the bad memories of last season again. And we need to distance ourselves from that as soon as possible.
Well, absolutely. I think you're spot on the head. I think this is an important game for both teams because, like you said, they were going in two very different directions last year. They're really going to want to come out this year and set the tone, especially Boro with a new manager. Looking at Barrow and who they lost, the biggest one obviously is John Rooney. They brought in Callum Gribben from Sheffield United under 23 on a free transfer. He's going to be a guy there that I think they're going to look at to replace Rooney because he's really the only attacking midfielder that they brought in. Luke James, they brought him back. He's going to help them with scoring up front. Dior Angus, he is just a really special player at this level. When I watch him, he has so much pace and so much athleticism. The knock on him, I would say, would be his first touch isn't that great. But he also seems like a really good from the set spot. I saw his penalty kick, but it was just brilliant on Saturday. So I have to think that he'll be fine taking the set pieces. Josh Kay, that's a guy that I think is underrated. He had 6 goals for them. I think they're going to rely on him to get more than 6 this year if they're going to keep up the Barrow Salona, if you will. But then, really just kind of looking at it, I see that they lost, obviously Rudy was big. They lost 2 center backs in Josh Granite and Matty Elston, but then they brought in Scott Wilson from Burnley on a free transfer. They brought in Matty Platt. They brought in James Jones from Altrincham. So it seems like they've replaced those center backs. They've replaced some of the forwards up front, but it just seems like Rudy is that one guy that they haven't been able to replace so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think the main thing to say about Stevenage is that once that decision was made, or in fact, one or two of the big signings came in before the decision to reprieve Stevenage came, and actually Alex Ravel has turned that into a positive. He's saying, well, do you know what? The club is set up so well that players want to come to us, even if we were going to be in non-league. And he was saying, well, that shows the kind of level of commitment of the people we've managed to get. I don't know if they knew something we didn't, but we've got in Ben Coker, very, very experienced former Southend player, played 186 league games for Southend. He's 31. His fitness hasn't been great. So it's, one of those ones where a club like us has to take a gamble on those kind of players. Another really interesting one is, I suppose the French pronunciation is Romain Vincelot, but he's inevitably going to be Vincelot or, Sir Vincelot. And he's come on a free transfer from Shrewsbury Town. And the interesting thing about him is that he has, along with a few other athletes, I don't know if you follow tennis at all, but Andy Murray, had this hip resurfacing thing to try and rescue his career. And it seems to have worked. And Vincelot is supposedly basically the first footballer that's had a hip resurfacing operation. And he is, I believe, 34. So if you're having that kind of operation at that age, and that's somebody that's hungry to carry on playing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like, somebody that decides to have microfracture surgery on their knee or something where it's like, you're having this surgery to keep playing it, and it's not an easy surgery. Now, when I look at Stevenage, one of the things that kind of caught my eye is so I see that The total market value of their departures is 3.49 billion, where the total market value of their arrivals is 1.16 million. So I mean, is this something to be concerned about? Or is this kind of where maybe they got rid of a lot of expensive guys that weren't performing and maybe got in some cheaper and hungrier guys?
It's really hard to say. I mean, is it kind of just sort of, is it kind of preparing for the kind of COVID storm or, financial storm or what? But we let go of a huge squad. So I think that's one thing. We let go of people who were quite senior professionals, so I guess they've got higher wages. And I've
Joel Byram, for instance, or Adam Ilabt.
Yeah, but these are people at the tail ends of their careers, and if you look at, I mean, I've got up transfermarket.co.uk, and if you look at where these players have gone, I mean, Joel Byram is a Boro legend, but he's gone to Farsley Celtic in non-league.
Yeah, I've got Transfer Market in front of me right now, and that's exactly that. The two guys that I named just there are 34 and 35 years old, respectively. So that was kind of why I mentioned them. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the players that have left, and I'd say that Ben Nugent, Cat Scratch Fever, legend. he went to Barnet, which is a pretty
just
solid
signed with
club.
them. Yeah, but it's
Jake
all non-league.
Cassidy to York City, Paul Digmead to Cambridge United, Paul Farman to Carlisle.
I must mention, I mean, Paul Farman, I think will be the biggest loss because he's a really, really good goalkeeper. He was in the Lincoln City side that did wonders, beat Burnley in the FA Cup and got up from the conference and then ended up second choice, didn't want to be second choice, came to Stevenage and obviously had one goodish season and one bad season. But I mean, he had two good seasons. He's a great player.
And two 20-year-old keepers that you brought in now.
Yeah, and I mean, Jamie Cumming from Chelsea, I mean, in the Portsmouth game, he looked really, really, really good. I think that, both of those keepers, you worry about the lack of experience, I think, because what Farman gave you was just sort of such confidence at the back. And, even with all the points deductions and things, I think we still only stayed up by about 2 points. So Paul Farman is probably, singly responsible for keeping Stevenage in the Football League, along with the owner of Bury Football Club and Macclesfield and a certain pandemic, but never mind. But
I was going to say, I saw that you guys picked up Ben Coker, the left back from Lincoln City. I thought that was a nice signing.
Very good. And Luke Prosser as well. Luke Prosser from Colchester. And that one raised a lot of eyebrows. It's one of those, how did you get him kind of transfers? The facilities at the club are still great. It's still a well-run club. If you play for us, you'll get paid, which I think is an enormous plus. But yeah, just looking at these guys that have left, and there's very few I'll miss, I have to say. There was something about last season, the kind of inertia over the club. Someone like Adam Ilabt, came to us with a very, very good reputation, but it just wasn't working. And he's gone to, Whitehawk, which is a sort of lower non-league team. And then Ben Kennedy is worth mentioning as a departure because he has been, a really, really good player for the club. I mean, as a really, really young player, he sort of had, there's something about the very, and you must have seen Michael Owen's goal against Argentina at the World Cup when he was 17 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And Ben Kennedy, at our level, had some of those kinds of early he had that early fearlessness about him. It was a very, very good player for a few years, but it's just, I think he's got some personal problems and things. So he's joined Crusaders, which basically for him is going home to Northern Ireland, and whether that's permanent or whether that's just for a while, I don't know. There's one or two might have beens. I mean, I was sad to see Jason Cowley go, who was a really, really good, promising striker from non-league. And, the reason things didn't work out for him last season, I think, was just far too much was put on quite an inexperienced player. It was mismanagement, really. And one or two others that I'll just be kind of sad to see go. There might have been, but on the other hand, in Alex Ravel's position, I think you had to be ruthless. Yeah, this is a pretty interesting squad. We haven't mentioned Remo Hutton, who has come in from Birmingham City. He's a left back, so lots of, defensive investment, whereas the forwards are more sort of from non-league. So, we hope that a team which we thought was going to batter the National League, I don't know if that would have been true, but, we hope that will be a team that's at least good enough to, get us to mid-table, banish last season's demons, and let us move on. But the bookmakers have very much decided now that Stevenage is a Morecambe, if you see what I mean. They have got us down as a team of kind of low means, which is going to struggle. Yeah. And obviously, if Saturday goes badly and games after that, then, it's going to be difficult to shake that off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many question marks with Stevenage, because it really is it's a whole brand new roster. And then with Barrow, it's almost completely the opposite, where you have pretty much the same team returning, except for the three players that I mentioned earlier. I think the incoming versus outgoing is kind of the opposite too. The total market value of their departures is 193,000. Total market value for rivals is 1.46 million. And then, just kind of looking at it, like I said, I mean, they've replaced the two center backs that they lost with veteran players. Rooney is going to be a loss, but then they've made other acquisitions at other positions to get stronger defensively, and I ultimately just think this is a team that's going to play a more counter-attacking style, and maybe just have another deep midfielder and try to prevent goals and not really look to replace Rooney. I mean, otherwise, you look at the guys that left. I mean, you've got a couple of backup keepers. This is a team that's returning their starting keeper from last year. I mean, it's very unusual to see a team get promoted and stay this stable, but that's really what I'm seeing with Boro, where the biggest change is at the manager.
Yeah, well, isn't part of that a deal was put on that Ian Evatt was not allowed to take Barrow players with him this season?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I know Stevenage did a similar thing when Wesley went to Preston North End, and it's a shrewd move, because otherwise, he could have taken the whole team up there. And as things stand, I mean, looking at Barrow and also looking at Harrogate, who got a decent result in the League Cup, and teams generally come up from the conference and expect to do pretty well. So if anything, I think that it's going to be managing expectations, because I think that Barrow supporters probably still think of themselves as a traditional league club, and are going to be looking at themselves to kind of grow into the league pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that expectations are going to be high there, and I don't see that Barrow will be making a playoff push this year, because that's really hard to do. I don't see any reason that they can't be mid-table. But what we're really here today to do is to give our prediction on what we think is going to happen here on Saturday. And I think we've covered pretty in-depth on both clubs. So I think now we've reached a good point where, Jonny, I'm going to let you do the honors and you give your score prediction for Saturday first.
All right. Before I give the prediction, I'm going to say what I want to happen. And I've got pretty modest goals, really. I would like us to score at least one goal, and I would like us to not concede in the last 10 or stoppage time. But in terms of what I think will actually happen, you've got to be optimistic. And I also think there is just a chaos element to this whole thing. I mean, you've seen that with the League Cup games, with a hugely disrupted pre-season and just a really strange atmosphere with no fans at games and things. And so I think that makes it really unpredictable. But I cast my mind back to our first game in the Football League, which was at home to Macclesfield Town, and that was a 2-2 draw. So I'm going to go for something similar. Let's say 2-2.
All right. I could definitely see something like that happening. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch Stevenage because it wasn't televised over here. But I just imagine with so much of a flux of players that it's going to be kind of hard for Stevenage to have all of their tactics together yet. Whereas Barrow, when I watch them, they look like a well-oiled machine, mid-season form. Their backline was especially impressive. You never saw anybody out of position. Crosses into the box were cleared out cleanly. And I think that, like I said, Barrow-Salona is over. This is going to be a counter-attacking team based on what I saw last Saturday. I think that Barrow's going to play it safe. I think it's going to be really hard for Stevenage to get anything forward against them. And I'm going to say it ends 1-0 in favor of Barrow.
Okay, well, as long as it's before the 80th minute, I'll live with it.
Yeah, I think it'll be one of those games where, Barrow will hit on a long ball, maybe to Dior Angus, gets away on a long ball and puts one away, or draws a penalty or something like that, and then they get that one goal and then just kind of defend from there is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what to expect from us, but I just hope, there'll be a bit of fearlessness, because you've got these people, Tyrone Marsh supposedly had the season of his life last season in the conference. So we're looking at people like that. Effiong for Dover was really, really useful last season. So we're just hoping that these players are going to say, grasp that opportunity. This is your time to kind of make your mark in the Football League. So I hope that will kind of count for something.
One last note from me is that Scott Quigley did not play in the Derby game, but he did re-sign with Barrow, so I expect that we will see Scott Quigley on Saturday.
Okay.
All right, Jonny, did you have anything else before we wrap up here?
No, I think that we're good to go.
All right. Well, I wish you luck with your prediction, and we'll look forward to doing this throughout the season. And hopefully, Stevenage will see some better results than they did last year, and Barrow will experience a good first year in League Two, as these are the two clubs that we're going to kind of focus on throughout the year here.
Okay, roll on Barrow versus Boro.
Have a good one, Jonny.
Cheers.
Cheers.